All right. Good evening, colleagues. Good evening, participants of this meeting. As usual, it's me, your host, Diana Ndolo, and my co-host, Diana. And our humble guest today is Engineer Paul KIOKO. At this very moment, I will hand over to my colleague, Diana, to take us to the next stage and guide us through the first session. Diana?
Yeah, so welcome, Engineer KIOKO, to this webinar. We are so glad to have you this evening. Thank you, Engineer Ndolo, for co-hosting this with me. So what you'll be expected to talk about is an introduction of yourself, your background, your candidacy, what you're vying for, and your manifesto. From there, we shall ask you questions, and that is everyone who is participating in this webinar and feels like they have a question to ask you, they'll ask you. And then from then you'll give us your parting shots, or rather your pitch on why we should vote for you. So welcome everybody, and welcome Engineer KIOKO. So we will all mute our microphones and videos. Don't expect any nods or any yes, because we want to give you some seamless time while you're talking. Karibu.
Right, thank you so much. And let me take this opportunity to thank you very much indeed because of the time you have taken all along for hosting a number of candidates, including myself, for this event, which culminates tomorrow or on Monday, once the ballot is cast. My name is Engineer Paul C.K. KIOKO. I'm a civil engineer by training, and I would want to mention here that I do have a Master of Science in Civil Engineering, a Master of Business Administration in Strategic Management. I also have a BSc in Civil Engineering, alongside other qualifications, which include being a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. I am also a lead expert and a corporate member of the Environment Institute of Kenya. And in addition, I also am a member of some sector within the Catholic Diocese of Kitui, amongst other personal attributes. So what I'd want to mention here is that my engineering background started way back when I was in primary school, when I thought I was dreaming of doing a road through a hill, which was just adjacent to our homestead. And when I asked, I was told there was a Mzungu who used to climb that hill using their cars during the colonial times. And I thought that was going to be possible, but I think I will mention that as I go along, what my dream came to be. I want to say that I studied at St. Joseph's Junior Seminary in Mwingi. I went ahead to do my degree and the subsequent postgraduate qualifications that I've mentioned here. And to cap it all is that I am at an advanced stage of completing my PhD in civil engineering, where I'm supposed to come up with a proper research on vibration of nearby structures, which are induced by standard gauge and the meter gauge rail transit within Nairobi metropolis. So my candidacy is that of the Honorary Secretary of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. And I must say that I am up to the task, and therefore I'm happy to be hosted and to say more and shed light on this position within the institution, which was started way back in 1972 after the collapse of the East African community. I want to add here that I have over 18 years of work experience, and I started my journey in a construction site in the coastal region of Mombasa, I was involved in the construction of the Paradise Hotel, which was bombed sometimes. And I think it was brought to the public domain, and everybody knows what happened during that time for that hotel. I was also involved in the refurbishment and the reconstruction of the Mombasa International Airport in the year 2007, before the marathons that took place then. I have been a part-time or a term consultant for British Oxygen Company that produces oxygen. I've also been a term consultant for the Aga Khan Foundation during the time I was within the coastal region of Mombasa. I worked in design office and I worked with contractors. So I represent a vast segment of engineers, right from construction to design and supervision, that is project management. I would want to add here that I have worked for projects, United Nations World Food Program in Kakuma, which is the largest refugee camp in this country, in the years of 2012. And all along after that, I went ahead to join the county government of Kitui, where I was the county minister for lands, infrastructure, and urban development. So therefore, my responsibility had everything to do with the policy formulation and implementation. I was involved in a lot of infrastructure projects, and I was taking care of all the projects for all the county departments. I was able to prepare cabinet memos for approval. I was very instrumental and the key in representations of the counties at the Senate during the transfer of functions at the time when Mwangi Kinuthia was in charge of that transition body. Have been a chairman, sectoral chair of the roads bill 2015, and the roads bill was being reviewed to accommodate the devolved functions that were transferred to the counties. And in addition to that, I was also involved in the discussions around the fiscal planning and land use bill that was enacted recently in 2019, and it has everything to do with infrastructure. And therefore, it involves a bit of engineering and an understanding of the effect that it has on infrastructure within this country. And as you know, infrastructure is one of the key enablers of the Vision 2030. I want to go ahead and add here that I was also involved in the discussions at the Council of Governors on the Community Lands Bill, because everything you construct is always situated within a land mass. And therefore, I am very much experienced when it comes to policies, frameworks, and corporate governance. I must add on to say here that I was involved in a lot of training within the country and outside the country on infrastructure and governance. And this makes me have the passion to cascade that knowledge, not only within government circles, but also outside to the other corporate world for private entities that are also created by acts of parliament, like the Institution of Engineers is a creature of the Societies Act, which is also a creature of the Kenyan Constitution. It is at this juncture that I want to mention the supremacy of the people. And the people here, I mean the engineers, who are the stakeholders of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. They own it and they employ the council. The council employs the secretariat. And that is how corporates are supposed to function within proper structures. And therefore, it is an important point to mention that within any governance, we are guided by the supreme law, the regulations, the statutes. And what do I mean here? By saying that, I mean that we have to subscribe to the principles and the values of governance, which are espoused very well in Article 10 and Article 232 of the Constitution of Kenya. And also, they are also buttressed in Article 2, which talks about the laws that are enacted, that they must be in consonant with the Constitution. And here I'm talking about the rule of law, the participation of the stakeholders, inclusivity, good governance, and so on and so forth. That is the supreme law, which we subscribe to and which has enabled us to formulate all the other policy frameworks. Now, I want to end by saying that I am currently the Dean School of Engineering and Technology of Southeastern Kenya University, which is a state university in this country. I am also the coordinator of the Directorate of Technical and Vocational Training within the Southeastern Kenya University. I have been able to come up with 5 engineering degree programs within a record time of 6 months. That is electrical engineering, civil engineering, mechanical engineering, agricultural engineering, clothing and textile engineering. We have taken them through the Engineers Board of Kenya, and that is work in progress. We have advertised for several positions, and I would want to invite engineers to express interest in working in the academia. And I'm also inviting engineers to continue pursuing higher degrees because the bar is very high for the university's recruitment. Yet, engineers have the potential. I'd also want to mention here that in line with the government directives and also for the benefit of engineers in this country, I have come up with 17 artisanal training courses within engineering, the broad engineering training, so that we can improve the skills for artisans within the country. It is unfortunate that you will look for plumbers, you cannot get them. Trained masons, you cannot get them. And the pack. That is a big challenge we have to grapple with, even as we prepare for industrial takeoff for this country. I also want to mention here that in addition to those 17 artisanal courses and the 5 engineering degree programs, alongside all the administrative work within the university and heading all the departments of engineering, I have also been able to partner with the National Construction Authority in the past to train over 200 contractors on the aspects that affect the implementation of infrastructure within the various acts under the building code. And that is the National Construction Authority Act. And that is evident from NCA itself. You can find out. In addition to which, I've also been involved in scrutinizing and critiquing the existing NCA Act to the extent that it affects the operations of NCA and to the extent that it affects also the delivery of services from contractors. That we were able to discuss sometimes back in Embu with the Engineers Board of Kenya, and I think a lot of input went into it. The idea is to have a holistic approach within the built environment. I have been a discussant on several occasions within the Coalition of Built Environment, which brings together engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, project managers, and physical or land use planners in Nairobi. And a lot is ongoing. I've also been involved in giving my views to the bill, or that which we call the Built Environment Bill. And I've also been involved in the review of the procurement policy, right? So that we can have we can position ourselves as engineers. The challenge I've seen in the course of all this, the involvement of engineers has been limited, just like it happened sometimes back on 27th of 2010, August, when we found that some of the functions that were devolved included health. And in my opinion, I thought doctors should have come up very strongly so that as we devolved other functions, we probably would have thought differently. But that is my personal opinion. Now, having said that, in the year 2018, I joined the Institution of Engineers of Kenya. And I joined the IEK as the CEO of the Institution of Engineers of Kenya in December 2018. After an advert that saw me successful in all aspects of the recruitment, and I started work in December 2018 at IEK at Top Plaza. I was very passionate about it. And what happened is that I had to take a leave of absence, unpaid leave of absence, to add value to IEK in my capacity. Having said all that which I have said, and having thought that I was going to be of use. And therefore, what happened is that we started off very well, and I started learning the institutional setup and trying to understand how best I could carry out my duties. And I was very, very impressed by what I thought I could do. And so in the course of time, although in the intervening period, it took time before I could get my appointment letter, probably because of the way in which we are structured at IEK. And the appointment letter was not available from December until sometimes after March 2019. And I thought those were lapses in corporate governance. It doesn't happen like that. For you to be released from your existing employment to take unpaid leave of absence, you must show proof that you already have an appointment letter from the other side for purposes of audit as a government officer. That notwithstanding, and to me that was not a big issue, I discovered that there was quite some work to be done. And I was able to look at the constitution, and I noticed, yes, there was a provision for appointment of a CEO. But beyond that, it was not very well defined what the work of a CEO is, either within the constitution or within any other existing legal framework within our beloved Institution of Engineers of Kenya. And therefore, these are being some of the things that I had to look at and grapple with. You notice that we have several committees within IEK, and therefore those committees, you have the executive committee, which is the president, the secretary, the honorary secretary, the first vice president, the second vice president, and the honorary treasurer. You have the functions and conference, the welfare committee, the membership capacity building committee, the advocacy, publicity, and the journal committee, and the constitutional review committee. I must register here and say that I was a member of all those committees. I had previously actually been appointed before I went to be CEO been appointed to the membership of Constitutional Review Committee. And as matters stood, I went through the existing documents, and therefore it is only important, even as we prepare to take over the mantle of leadership, that there is a limited, if any, existing policy framework to operationalize the Constitution of the Engineers of Kenya, which we are seeking to review expeditiously. And therefore, having said that, you find that now the operations, while still being run, are fraught with inherent inadequacies, and those inadequacies can only be solved by coming up urgently with policy framework. And the policy is very important. When we mention policy, sometimes people think a policy looks like a master's or a PhD dissertation, a thesis, or anything perfect. Far from that. A policy can be 2 pages. And therefore, the only most important way of going around it is to have the participation of the members as stated in Article 10 of the Constitution of Kenya, so that we get the buy-in of all the members. So before that happens, the respective committees, or it can even be cascaded to members, where you need to come up with a draft policy document, because you do not just send the Constitution of Engineers of Kenya to engineers to read and give you the feedback. It is not going to happen unless anybody is new in Jerusalem. We are not strangers there. Therefore, we must have a document which is synthesized, summarized, and the information sent to engineers, and engineers invited and bought tea and lunch for them to sit down, discuss matters of skipping, and come up with inputs which will be informed by the concept notes or the draft documents. And therefore, having said that, and also having mentioned something to do with my manifesto in passing, I want to say that I've been able to come up with pillars, about 6 pillars, which I think will be a cure to the existing problems that have refused to go away. And that is accelerated membership. By accelerated membership, I mean membership that cuts across all our stakeholders, and that is the consulting engineers, the professional engineers, and the graduate engineers, including the technicians. How do we accelerate this membership? This membership can only be accelerated if we have a policy on membership to define who a member is. How do you become a member? So that what we know is put on paper, it is critiqued. How do you admonish, or probably how do you discipline a member? How do we make sure that the membership, there's legitimacy of membership, to avoid issues like we have seen before, where the leadership has been looking for individuals to prosecute through the DCI because it is perceived, real or perceived, that some members conferred benefits to others by making them corporate members. And this is a matter which IBK has taken up very seriously, and that is not the way corporates are meant to be managed. So that by accelerating the membership, we also structure the way in which we mentor our students and to anchor them to some law, which can be lobbied within the national government. And during this time for the clamor for the Big Four agenda, so that we have the senior engineers taking up the junior engineers, like it happens in the medical field, right? So that it is not for lack of opportunities, but it is because there is serious disjointedness in which we coordinate our activities as the engineering fraternity within the private, public sector, and the public service departments. When that happens, we will not have engineers asking questions because all the answers will be within the membership policy. Number 2 of my manifesto is welfare revitalization. Revitalization is breathing new freshness of breath to the welfare of engineers. And the welfare is defined as that welfare of the living human beings. And therefore, welfare of engineers cuts across issues like non-practice allowance. Whereas we have doctors in all the sectors of our economy being paid non-practice allowance, engineers are not paid. A doctor will spend 6 years at the university, engineer will spend 5 years at the university, and we are the drivers and the shakers and movers of the economy. And you find that it is not clear at what point we can remunerate engineers, incentivize the service within the public service and in the academia within our state universities, so that even as you pay an additional 80,000 to a doctor, you also in reciprocity pay 80,000 to a professional engineer. I will still have to thank the government that in some provisions they have given a waiver for engineers to be able to be accommodated in some positions, which ordinarily other professionals will not occupy if they did not have higher degrees. I must say that we need also to discuss the issue of having engineers provided with group medical cover, which can be discussed, so that the price or the premiums of the insurers come down drastically when they have been negotiated. And the other thing about the welfare of engineers is strengthening the policies and the existing laws so that we give credence, we give more powers to engineers, even within the NCA that we have been reviewing, so that we have engineers leading the industry by both the deeds, actions, and in policy formulation. We also would want to discuss the issue of engineers' welfare in other facets. For example, we must have engineers being appointed, and it is very clear within the acts of parliament. Like if you talk about the boards, the Kenya Water Institute, the national government CDF, you find there are provisions there for backgrounds in engineering. It is for engineers to come together and speak in one voice so that we can pull in the same direction, because we have engineers in big positions in government. We lobby for engineers, not that we are selfish, but because it will always be that things will go wrong and you blame engineers. I've seen situations like in Malik, what happened there, because I was involved in giving my speech during the time when Malik went up in flames, and very many people gave different divergent opinions and what would have happened. Is it the road reserve? Is it the lack of facilities, the services for dealing with the fires and so on and so forth, and whether the county government or whether NCA or any other government agency has overriding powers to enforce the actions of developers and so on and so forth. I want also to mention the fact that the welfare of engineers must be such that during the trainings that we conduct for CPDs, we see how best we can bring down the cost of CPDs. The graduate engineers are affected mostly because they pay subscriptions, yet they will not be allowed to sign documents and submit them for approvals. And that is a discussion I want to bring on the table for all the stakeholders, right from the professional engineers, graduate engineers, the technicians. We will ask where technicians are in this. Their welfare should also be catered for, because as matters stand now, we have conflicting laws. We have the Kenya Engineering Technologists and Technicians Registration Board. And we also have the Engineers Act of 2011. And then the other KTTRB as an act of parliament, which accommodates technologists. Now, when it comes to promotions, we have difficulties. We will not be able to promote technologists to the same category that of professional engineers, and it looks punitive. What we need to do, and I have done this before, I was able to spearhead the possible repeal of the other act to accommodate our technicians in the Engineers Act of 2011. And there is serious backing from the national government. There is also serious backing from the Engineers Board of Kenya. And it is about time for IEK to come up seriously and lend their goodwill so that what we talk is translated into action if we want to transform our country so that everybody is on the table discussing various issues within the various cadres. And lastly, I want to mention the issue of the scale of fees. If you look at the architects, there is the engagement for professional services of 1987. There is also the CAP 525, I think, and the advocates remuneration order. Engineering is an old profession. EBK announced that they are pursuing it. A stronger IEK is a stronger EBK. There is no reason at all why we cannot have the scale of fees enacted. It is not an illegality. It only needs leaders to exert their intellect and have the wherewithal to provide direction, because that is the only time we can do cabinet memos for the principal secretaries and the directors to go and present at the cabinets. Anything outside will not work because government does not listen to stories and dreams. People have to put everything down in writing before they can support it. And that is what I am used to do myself. I want to mention the other thing about having a robust secretariat. What we have currently, I think we are doing what we call progressive versus remedial in the leadership of our institution, and what is loosely known as management through crisis. Whilst we still want to have a secretariat, it must be robust. As matters stand now, it is not clear at all, the distinction between the roles of the honorary secretary and the roles of the CEO of IEK. At some point, we are talking about mentorship of graduate engineers. But in retrospect, it could be that IEK also requires mentorship. I do not want to think that should be the case, because we have all the capacity and we know where we are supposed to go. We only need the goodwill. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because the secretariat, which is now headed by a CEO, initially it was an executive committee. And one senior engineer posed a question when I was recruited. Why do you need a CEO if you do not have managers? And the question was a bit tough because an IEK CEO is in charge of 2 clerks, okay? And these are members of staff who have learned the ropes and they know their work, they are competent, and I have always admired their work ethics. But we must have a policy called the human resource policy. We must have a structure even before policy.
Hello, engineer, are you there? Engineer? Engineer, are you there? All right, I think we will take
Take a breather.
we take a breather first.
Very